Suffering is a very powerful teacher, and it's necessary until we realize that it isn't. You have to suffer enough to get to the point where you're so sick of suffering that you choose something else for yourself. And it starts with your mind. I think I awakened to the power of suffering today. The silver lining of suffering. I went for a walk. It's a Sunday, so it wasn't a very special walk. It was about 20 minutes along the main road because I needed to get to a gas station since everything else is closed down here in Norway on Sundays. And with me I had Eckhart Tolle and Oprah Winfrey on a podcast where they talk about Eckhart Tolle's awakening from suffering, awakening to peace that came after a period of intense suffering for years and years. And he just woke up one day and he had this thought: I cannot live with myself any longer. And that thought was the beginning of him realizing that there must be something created in our minds, because I'm thinking about me as I'm two persons. The I that cannot live with myself any longer. So it made him reflect on who am I and who is this myself that I cannot live with. And after that was enough to bring him back to presence in the moment and realize that there must obviously be this part that I cannot live with. If there's an I, the real me that cannot live with this part anymore, what is that part? Well, it must be my mind. He woke up the next morning, I think, and he just saw everything with different eyes, in a new way, in new light. He woke up in his room and he looked around. And he had seen that room 1,000 times before, but everything seemed so much more vibrant, colorful, beautiful. He could see like the life of all of his things. And he was peaceful for the first time in probably his entire life. I think he was turning on 30 once that happened to him. And what was funny or interesting about this is the fact that when I was on this walk that I had gone so many times before, and it wasn't a special walk, it was, as I said, along the main road, but it's like I just really saw it for the first time. I just saw, because I live in a very beautiful place, I think. So even if it's just the main road to a gas station, everywhere I look is mountains, is water, is trees. And it's so beautiful. And I just found myself in awe of being able to experience that and to see that. And it made me feel so joyful just walking there on my own, completely alone on a Sunday morning, being able to use my senses and fully take in that moment, that beauty that was surrounding me everywhere. And I realized in that moment, where I realized that, wow, I'm seeing this in a very different light. I also realized this is familiar. I have been here before in that mind space of seeing something in such a new light. And it was a couple of years ago. I had 5 years of suffering. First, physical suffering. I was very ill. And after a while came mental suffering because of me constantly thinking about and noticing my physical illness. So, long story short, I had been 5 years in and out of doctor's appointments and hospitals. No one could give me an answer to what was going on with my body. They could only conclude with something is definitely going on, but we don't have the technology to figure out what it is. And coming out from the very last planned hospital doctor's appointment, they had told me that maybe in 10 to 15 years we will be able to help you, but now we don't know. And I just went out, I looked up, and at first I was so angry. Why was this happening to me? Why was it so impossible to find an answer? When will I ever feel better? And then grief, I think, in realizing that I probably would never know. But then relief. A huge relief, because in that moment, I think my suffering had been and was so intense, had been building up for 5 years. And for every new planned visit to a doctor or a hospital department, I got hope. And I started preparing for that appointment. And there was this question that maybe this time I would find out what was wrong with me. Maybe they could fix me. But that was also very tiring because it made me just really focus on the fact that there is something wrong with me all of the time. And in that moment where I realized that I have no more doctor's appointments, I felt kind of relieved also because I was so tired of focusing on my illness that in that moment I just realized I am so sick of suffering. I have tried everything except stop focusing on whatever is wrong with me. That was the only thing I hadn't tried for those 5 years. And that alternative felt so much lighter, so much better. And even if it felt like 0 things feeling good about me or my life at that point, because this affected everything, even if I decided I will just look for any kind of small little thing that feels better, that alternative was of course so much more appealing. And it was very short after that I had this walk that I kind of remembered this moment, this morning, that I recognized. I was on my way to the office and I was walking through a park that I walked through every day for many, many years, but I had never really seen it until that moment. It was really early, so even the ducks and the swans that lived there, they were still sleeping, all of them except one duck that was playing around in the water, and the sun was rising and it was springtime. It was chill but fresh and crisp outside, and I just stopped and I admired this duck playing around in the water, and I was in awe of that moment. And I found myself so grateful and joyful that I was able to be there and experience this beautiful thing that surrounded me. And it probably doesn't sound very intense because it's something that can only be felt, but it was a very intense feeling of joy and gratefulness. And when you have been suffering for quite some time, those type of feelings become very powerful. They are always powerful, and especially then. And as I found myself on my walk this morning, listening to Eckhart Tolle talking about his awakening from suffering and seeing everything in a new light, and I was doing the same without even recognizing it first. I was seeing my surroundings in a new light. And I remembered I've been here before mentally, after a long period of suffering. And the interesting thing is now was also after a period of suffering. Not at all as intense and major as the last time, but noticeable. And I think especially noticeable because of the fact that after I awakened from that last round of suffering, that feeling of joy and gratefulness towards everything and anything that I had formerly taken for granted, that was so strong, that was so powerful, and it lasted for such a long time. That after that, any period of time after that where I don't feel as good, I'm very quick to notice it because the contrast is so huge. Because I know how much better I can feel and how much better I'm supposed to feel, right? And it just made me really reflect on the fact that suffering is such a powerful teacher. And Eckhart said in his podcast, because he is, I don't know if you know about him, but he is one of the major spiritual teachers of our time. And he said, if it had, oh my God, Lottie, you're really itchy and scratchy over there. Jeez. He says that if his suffering hadn't happened in his life, his spiritual teaching would never come to life. It was only because of the fact that he suffered so intensely that he eventually got so sick of that suffering that there was this voice in his head saying, there has to be another way to live. I cannot live with myself any longer. And he says, and I finally get it now, suffering is necessary until you realize it isn't. Lottie, we're trying to have a moment over here. Maybe you shouldn't be showing everything off. Anywho, just think about that. Suffering is necessary until you realize it isn't. What does that mean? Well, maybe we have to have periods of suffering to actually get to the point where we get so sick of it, where we decide we have suffered enough, where this question comes that maybe there is a better way of living my life than this. Then that's what opens our eyes and makes us come on here or open a book or go to a retreat or whatever it might be that we do because we have maybe a small belief, but nonetheless a belief about there being an alternative to this suffering. If we hadn't suffered, we would never question it. We would never get so tired of it that we would choose something better. So I'm thinking, my period where I was the happiest person I know actually came because of my 5 years of physical and mental suffering. I had to go that path and to experience that suffering for so long that I just gave up the fight. And I said, I'm so tired of this. I'm going to try something differently. And I did. And it was the most amazing thing I've ever experienced. Just choosing to look for things within and without, that feels better. That just snowballed into anything and everything, and what I learned from that, what you can learn from that, is number one, realizing that most of our suffering comes from our minds, from our thoughts, from us not using our minds on purpose, from just reacting to things and labeling them as negative, worrying about things that haven't happened or may not happen. It's not the situations. It's what we think about the situations. And I know that now, and I proved that to myself because I had these amazing experiences when I was still physically ill. But I didn't suffer. The 5 first years, I suffered because of me resisting it, because of me focusing on it. Just telling my mind in all these different ways, I am ill. There's something wrong with me. Why is there something wrong with me? This is so unfair. What if I never get better? Etc., etc. But then after that happening, after me getting so sick of suffering, I found myself in the midst of it all, just tearing up because of the beauty that was surrounding me all of this time. I had walked that path so many times in my life, not even looking up to see my beautiful surroundings, because I was all up in here, thinking, worrying, nagging. And life happened around me and I wasn't there to see it or feel it. So I know that most of my suffering came from my thoughts. And not all thoughts are bad. Thoughts can be amazing. And that is what I learned from this as well. If I realize that my thoughts, my resistance towards what is what made me unhappy, if my thoughts have that much power over my mood, over my health, over my mentality, what can it look like if I start to think on purpose? If I know that my thoughts leads to the way I feel, and that negative thoughts makes me feel bad, good feeling thoughts makes me feel good. What happens if we just change it around? And I really saw what happened once I changed it. And it can't be described, it can't be explained, it can only be felt. And here I am thinking that I've had this period of suffering again, not at all as strong as the last time, but it definitely awoke me to a new chapter. And maybe that's what life looks like. Maybe we have these periods. And maybe I needed to get this kind of suffering to really see and remind myself that yes, it is true. Most of my suffering comes from my mind. So be sure to remember and to remind yourself of what you know. Because the reason for my suffering now is honestly just me forgetting everything I learned back then. And not tending to my thoughts, not choosing my focus. So it's such a powerful reminder, and also it is so great to feel the power of it, because I have been changing. If you have been on this journey with me, you know that. You know I've been doing things to remind myself of what I knew back then. And it's working. This feeling today, I teared up and I just kept walking because I just wanted to stay in that moment. And I thought I have to share this. Suffering is a very powerful teacher, and it's necessary until we realize that it isn't. You have to suffer enough to get to the point where you're so sick of suffering that you choose something else for yourself. And it starts with your mind. You either find ways to take breaks from your mind. That was very hard for me to do because my mind is so overactive. So what I did after those 5 years, I didn't take breaks from my mind, but I learned how to use it on purpose. And it was amazing. And I think after this round of suffering is when I truly start to explore shutting my mind off, as in returning to the present moment, finding stillness up there and just enjoying the moment. I think it needs to happen in these processes because it's very much to go from over-analyzing and overthinking everything to just quiet. So I think everything happened in the right order, and it's so interesting to keep learning about yourself and our minds. And I had a moment of presence today, and it was so beautiful, and it was attainable, and things are changing, things are happening, and it doesn't always feel like that, but it's happening under the surface. And it's always like that when I think of it. Just give it some time and you will see that something changed, And it did. And I have these moments very often now. I just want to cry because I see so much beauty, and they maybe only last for 2 minutes. And then the rest of my day can go back to some sort of suffering or being tired or any other thing. But I'm no longer arguing with it because I now know that I just need to let go of the resistance. And I know that the more I do that, the more I trust that I am changing things, the more of those present moments I will have and be able to enjoy. So that's the silver lining of suffering. Maybe we need it, but it doesn't have to go on forever, and that's the whole clue. That's our whole lesson. Thank you.